Welcome to another episode of Spirit-Anointed Leadership, a podcast designed to help all of us be spirit-filled and go after the things that God has for us. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in a small fender bender that was your fault? Have you ever accidentally backed into someone's car or something? Believe it or not, I've done that 3 times. I'm not proud of it. And you know what's funny? Is that all 3 happened in my driveway. No lie. A friend was over at our house, parked their car in my driveway. I got in my car, put my car in reverse, bam, went right into their car. This happened 3 times. You know what I do now? I consistently, always, both Mary and I back our cars into our driveway. We're the only ones that I know back their cars into the garage every day. And the only reason I do it is because I don't want to hit a car in my own driveway. And in this season right now in my life, my daughter's actually back from college. She's actually going to college in our town, which is awesome. But she parks her car in our driveway. And I know if I didn't back my car into my driveway and start out by looking out straight, I'd hit her car 5 times. I'm just convinced I'd do it. There's these little attention to detail. Back in 2006, Mary and I were blessed to finally buy our first home. I was 40 years old before I could afford to buy our first home. I was a church planner, always super, super poor, didn't have any money. And finally, when I was 40, we were able to buy our first home. And that was all fine and great. What's interesting is that we lived in our home maybe a year and a half. And one night our furnace went out, it just stopped working. Well, I went down and I looked at a couple different things. And I actually saw that there's a little 3-amp fuse that was busted. And I said, not a problem. I'll go to Ace Hardware and I'll buy a 3-amp fuse. But the problem was I didn't actually have one at home, and I didn't want to leave my wife and my girls without a furnace. So I happened to have a 10-amp fuse in my drawer at my little toolbox. So my toolbox got the 10-amp fuse, put it in my furnace, and left for the day. Came back home. Now the furnace still wasn't working. It wasn't working again. As it turned out, because I put the wrong size fuse in it, I fried the motherboard. Guess how much that cost me? $3,000. No, I'm not making that up. It cost me $3,000 to fix the furnace because of the motherboard that went out. And what was the problem? Attention to detail. I had replaced a 3-amp fuse with a 10-amp fuse, and it cost me $3,000. See, I just assumed that a little detail like that wouldn't matter, when in reality, it really did. Attention to detail often matters. The best run organizations are the ones that take care of both the big and the small things. Like, for instance, when we get on an airplane, we want to get there safely, and we'd kind of like our luggage to get there when we get there. When we go to a restaurant, we want to have good food, and we'd kind of like it if the bathrooms were clean. When we go get our car serviced, we'd like to know that they do it right, and we'd like to know that there's a place for us to hang out where we can get some work done. Nick Saban, who, as we all know, was the coach for forever at the University of Alabama. You might love Dick, you might hate Dick, you might even not even know who Dick Saban is. But this is what he said. He said, there are 5 choices in life. You can either be poor, average, good, excellent, or elite. And I just got to tell you, for me, the way that I want to live my life, I want to live my life leading an elite organization, which I think includes both a spiritual component and a strategic or a functional component. Now, prayer has to be a major component of this. Relying on the Holy Spirit has to be a major component. Our personal walk with Jesus has to be a major component of all this. This guy by the name of Paul Anderson made this statement, and it's just one of my all-time favorite quotes. If Christ is alive, he desires to lead his church. If Christ desires to lead his church, then his will should be sought. If his will can be sought, then it should be discerned. And if it can be discerned, then it deserves to be obeyed. This is nothing more than the basic Christian life. What Paul Anderson is encouraging us to do is not decide, but discern. If this is Christ's church, what does Christ want with his church? It's not Chris's church. It's not about me deciding what happens in his church. It's about me discerning what does Jesus want for his church. And then Romans chapter 12, where Paul writes in verse 2, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you'll learn to know God's will, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. See, being an elite organization it always starts with us having a well-ordered soul. If we're going to be an elite organization, we have to discern the good, perfect, and pleasing will of God. For the organization that I'm blessed to serve, which is the GLR, it has to flow from us being in tune with what the Holy Spirit is saying. But it doesn't end there. We have to own our purpose, our mission, as well as our ethos. It has to be adopted by the entire GLR staff. And in your church or your ministry context, your ethos has to be adopted by everyone on the team, everyone in the children's ministry, everyone on the greeting team, everyone on the worship ministry has to be adopted. Your ethos has to be adopted by everyone. Let me tell you what I mean by ownership or ethos. We all understand what an owner is, which is why I will never buy a car that used to be a rental car. I know what I drive like when I drive a rental car. And I don't want to ever own a car that used to be driven by people like me. No way. What we're talking about here is having an owner's mentality. Let me give you a definition, if you will, of ethos. It's the characteristic spirit of a culture or community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. Jesus talked about this. He talked about the difference between owners and hired hands, right? In John chapter 10, Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd, and the good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when they see a wolf coming. They'll abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock. The hired hand runs away because he's working only for the money and doesn't really care about the sheep. So what does an ownership versus a hired hand mentality look like? Well, think about the difference between owning a house and renting a house. How we treat the dwelling that we live in. As an owner, we care about the long-term value of the house. As a renter, we don't look at the house in the same way. So members of an elite team act like owners, even when they're not. They care about all aspects of the organization, not just the ones that they're responsible for, according to their job description. So the best leaders I know walk around picking up trash within their organization, both literally and figuratively. Many of you will know that I have a leadership crush on this guy by the name of General Mark Welsh. And, Mark is a 3-star general, and for reasons I don't understand, Mark has allowed me to become a friend of his, and he's invited me because he was the president of Texas A&M University. And so he'd invite me to Texas A&M University football games, which are over the top amazing. And Mary and I got to go hang out with 50 other people in the president's box and watch a football game. Well, I'll never forget this. I was watching, there are bleachers where you can sit down in, but there's also a reception area where you can just stand and watch the game. There's an incredible buffet with incredible food, and we would sit there and eat this phenomenal food, and sometimes we'd eventually sit down, but I was standing kind of in the reception area, and I noticed there was a piece of trash on the floor, and I immediately went to go pick it up when before I could do it, President Welsh picked up that trash. And I said, "Here, Mr. President, I'll take it from you and throw it away." And he said, "Oh, no, I've got it." He's the president of the university. He pays people to go around the university and pick up trash. And yet, what did he do? He picked up the trash. As it would turn out, Mark introduced me to this guy by the name of Dave Pollard, who happens to be a rear admiral now in the Navy. When I first met Dave, he was actually the captain of an aircraft carrier. And Dave invited me, along with some of the pastors, to go and hang out on an aircraft carrier. I'll never forget, we're walking around the deck of the aircraft carrier where obviously very expensive planes take off. And he happened to see a piece of trash on the deck. And Dave just intuitively went over and picked up the trash and threw it away. Now, he's the captain of the aircraft carrier. He doesn't have to do it, but he does it because it's the right thing to do. I went from kindergarten to 12th grade, both at school and at church, with a dear friend by the name of Vicky. Vicky and I have been lifelong friends, literally. She's my wife's best friend. I introduced my wife to Vicky in the 5th grade, and they've been best friends ever since. They were roommates together for a while in college. It was fun. And so Vicky's still a part of our lives. I just hung out, and Mary and I just hung out with Vicky 10 days ago and had lunch with her. She's awesome. But for nearly 30 years, Vicky worked for Disney. She actually worked at Walt Disney World. And I can't count how many times we'd be walking around a Disney property with Vicky, and she would see trash somewhere that some guest had dropped, and she would pick it up and put it away. Now, does Vicky have to do that? No, there are people that Disney pays to go around and pick up trash. So why did she do it? Because she saw herself as an owner, not just someone who's walking around, not as a hired hand. We operate this place, the GLR does, called the Ministry Center. It happens to be in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And if you live in Illinois or Wisconsin, I want to invite you to please come join us. If you live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or on the eastern side, I want to encourage you to come. Please visit us. We want to host you at the Ministry Center. Because I got to tell you, the Ministry Center, I don't see it primarily as our offices. It doesn't belong to us. It actually belongs to the pastors and the leaders of the Great Lakes region. It's there for their use, not necessarily ours. And that's why the place looks as good as it does on the inside. That's why we have a refrigerator with a glass front that has really good drinks on it. Not generic drinks, not cheap drinks, but really good drinks. That's why we have full-size candy bars that we just give out to people. We open a drawer and there's a full-size candy bar of Hershey's or Reese's or Snickers or Milky Way, whatever your favorite is. We have a Keurig with so many different choices. And I understand some of you are coffee snobs and Keurig's not the best, but at least we've got something there. We have all kinds of teas there for people. You can have tea if you want. We have a really good sound system, several of them, 3 or 4 different sound systems at the Ministry Center with good subwoofers and good sound systems. Why? Because we care about providing a place that's a good place for you where you can have a retreat with your leaders if you want. Now here's how it impacts the leaders of the organizations. Most morning when I arrive there, I actually pay attention. We have these ice makers that make this really good nugget ice. If you've ever been to Chick-fil-A, they have nugget ice, and I'm a big nugget ice person. So we have 2 different nugget ice machines at the Ministry Center. You want to know what I do most of the time when I walk in the Ministry Center? Is I actually make sure that we have enough nugget ice for anyone who shows up that day. I actually make sure that it's coming out, that it's working really well. I make sure that the sinks are clean. I don't ever go in the women's restroom, but I make sure that the men's restroom is clean. I often pick it up. I often refresh it with towels or toilet paper or Kleenex or whatever. I pick up the trash. The other day, the trash in the staff area, we have a little staff area, it stunk really bad because we had hosted a bunch of people and I think we had catered in Olive Garden, and the post Olive Garden meal just stunk really bad. So I took care of it. Like I took care of the trash and took it outside all the way to the dumpster. Now I could say, well, that's someone else's job. And many people would just walk past that kind of thing. We'd walk past the ice machine and say, oh, I'm too busy. We'd walk past the fridge and not look and make sure that there were drinks there for our guests. We'd walk past the bathrooms and not care if they had paper towels or toilet paper. But elite players on elite teams don't do that. They see the Ministry Center through the eyes of the people it belongs to, which is the pastors and the leaders of the GLR, and they want it to be as welcoming to those folks as it possibly can be. Now, again, what I care most about is that places like the Ministry Center and your churches would be filled with the Holy Spirit's presence, would be filled with prayer, would be filled with a sense of God's Spirit working among us. Yes, that's by far the most important thing. But meanwhile, I dare you, ask a secret shopper to come to a church service at one of your weekend services and ask them to notice everything that's both good and not so good about your service. You might be shocked. If they speak the truth in love to you, you might have some things that you'll learn about the organization. Every day I walk into the ministry center, I try and see it through fresh eyes. What do I need to see about this place? Is there a light bulb that's out? Is this there? Is that there? It's not because it has to be perfect. Yes, I want it to be filled with the Holy Spirit first and foremost. As my dear wife says, we want less meetings at the ministry center and more encounters with the Holy Spirit. That is true. But as elite leaders, I care about both. I care about the ministry of the Holy Spirit happening in our midst, and I care about showing off God's excellence where we are. So let me ask you, in the spaces and the places, the children's ministry spaces and places, in the green room of the worship team, in the foyer, have things been there for 5 years that no one has touched? Like, is there dust that's an inch deep that no one has cared about? What would it look like to look at your context with fresh eyes, to care deeply about the Holy Spirit's presence, and to care deeply about not allowing there to be trashy situations going on in your midst? I think Spirit-Anointed leaders care about both. They care about the Holy Spirit, and they care about not allowing there to be anything that would distract from the glory of God in that place. So, do me a favor. Do you have a leader in your life that you'd love to send this podcast to and to say, hey, let's hold each other accountable to make sure that we're going after being an elite leader in our organization? Would you like this podcast? Would you please communicate to us? Please let us know, what are the subject matters that you'd love for us to cover on a Spirit-Anointed Leadership podcast? Please write those in the comments. We really want to scratch where you itch. We want to make sure that we're covering topics that you care about. And finally, would you subscribe? We want to give you fresh content week in and week out. Let's go and be Spirit-Anointed leaders who, yes, fill our spaces and places with prayer and ask the Holy Spirit to come, and look at our spaces and places with fresh eyes to make sure if there's anything there that needs to be taken care of, we take care of it. Thanks so much. I love you. I believe in you. Have an awesome day.